let's start our workshop. So it's a graduate student workshop on developing a teaching statement. So we have three, well, it feels weird including me, wonderful facilitators here. Meg is here from the writing workshop. Doug, my colleague from the Center for Teaching and Learning, is here. I'm also an instructional design consultant at the CTL. I specifically do um, work, workshops and programming around graduate students. So welcome. And we wanted to start by, okay, by introductions and icebreakers. So first of all, I already said my name. Meg, Doug, is there anything else you wanted to add to the introductions?
Nope.
No, I just work at the Writing Center and at the graduate office. I'm a Writing Center consultant also. So if there's any lingering questions and maybe you want to make a session with me, we can totally do that.
And we will later have a QR code and link for the
Workshop.
writing workshop.
Yep.
So that will be available to you. Christina, could you drop in the background? We also have Christina, our graduate assistant at the CTL, who is moderating for us. Christina, thank you for everything you're doing. Could you drop the link for the resources real quick before we go further? Okay, so that's the drive where you'll be able to follow along for the slides. We also have a workbook in there, a booklet around our workshop today. So feel free to make a copy of that file and take notes in there as well. So we have 5 people joining us: Danielle, David, Kelly, oh, and you. So do you have a teaching philosophy? Okay. And have you written it down? Okay. Would others also could you just do like a show of hands, raise hands feature if you have a teaching philosophy? Yes, no. Oh, Jacob is here too. Okay. And have you all taught in a higher education setting? Okay. So going back to, I see Kelly nodding her head. So here's the resource folder. We already shared that with you. We also devised a Gemini agent assistant. Because this workshop is shorter, it's only an hour long. The Gemini is designed to help you kind of process your thoughts on your own as well. So if you ask, we'll come to this in a little bit. Help me with a miracle question. That's all you need to put in there, and it will walk you through the prompts is in the okay. The prompts that are in the booklet. And it will help you go from those questions into formulating a first draft of your teaching statement. One word of caution here, though, the whatever you get out of Gemini Assistant, you do not want to submit that right as it is. It's there because often when we start writing, a lot of us are in grad school. All of us have gone through grad school. And we know that staring at that blank page is grueling. It's painful. So, and it will give you the first draft, but personally, my teaching statement or my job market materials went through 6 months of revisions before it was something that I wanted it to look like. So it's there to give you the first draft, but you're going to want to keep revising it again and again and make it your own. Okay, so agenda. Did the introduction icebreaker. We're going to talk about the components of teaching philosophy, the structure of a teaching philosophy, and we're going to I actually moved the miracle question up a little bit. Sorry for those wrong order, and then we'll do a little bit more of the workshopping as we have time. So, first of all, even if you don't have your teaching philosophy written down, and some of you have said that you already do have a teaching philosophy, a lot of us have a teaching philosophy in terms of, okay, what should a classroom look like? And what do I want that classroom to look like, right? The difference is that not everyone has a 1.5-page document that articulates it, right? The hard part really is making all those jumbled thoughts in your head into a coherent document so that it is concise, it is clear, and it has a focus. So this workshop is really for designed to do that. So before we go further, the first thing I want you to do is start brainstorming what your teaching philosophy is. And even if you have a teaching philosophy, I would like you to do this. Because this approach might give you a new angle that you haven't really thought about. So in brainstorming, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes and say a miracle occurred. And you can do this by using the link that we have shared with you with in the booklet. So I think it was page 5 or something like that on the document. Make a copy of it. A miracle has occurred and everything in your life is better. You step into the classroom for the first time ever since the miracle happens. What does that look like? So think about, how is it different from your usual classroom? How does it feel in terms of atmosphere? What are students doing that is making it better? And what are you doing that makes it better? As well as what are some challenges you previously encountered that have now been solved? And how did it get solved? What is making it this classroom so that it has solved these issues? So I'll give you about 5 minutes. So it's 4:08 now. So I'll give you until 4:13 to do that. Okay, that was about 5 minutes. So you'll have more time to think about this. And again, you feel free to use the Google Gemini, the gem that we have created for you around this workshop, to develop that further. But so now that you've thought about what a miracle classroom looks like, and that miracle classroom is really an embodiment of what you want a classroom to look like, right? So that might embody like what you would want to do as a teacher, what kind of environment you want to be in, and things like that. So the question becomes, where do we go from there, right? So now we have this very amorphous image of what that dream classroom looks like. So from here, now we need to turn that into an actual philosophy, a 1.5 page document. So when we do this, I want you to first think about something. So first of all, who is that audience? And it's really about what that means. And is it for the job market? Is it for a specific employer? Or is it to better understand your own teaching philosophy because that's part of your professional development? And from the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Meg so that she can keep going.
Okay, so let's talk about writing for employers. So in public and private universities, employers are asking the following. Is this person self-aware and reflective? Are you able to think about the decisions you're making and their consequences? Are you adaptable? Do your values align with the institutions? Are you empathetic yet authoritative? And does this person utilize teaching practices grounded in both experience and research? So, in your teaching philosophy, that's something you're going to really want to emphasize, right? Not only do I have the pedagogy and the pedagogical theory to back up what I'm saying, but I also have experience, whether that's being a student in the classroom, having observations of other classrooms, or if it's in your own classroom. So, some strategies to design with your employer in mind. Research as much as possible, because you need to understand what your institution's values are and what existing faculty say about teaching there. And oftentimes, an institution will have documented approaches that they prefer when it comes to pedagogy. So, for instance, we use Nancy Chisholm's 5 components, but another university may not rely on such a pedagogical theory. Number 2 is to consider specific memorable experiences that you've had. Now, that could look like maybe a time that you were called upon in class and it meant a lot to you. And you were like, that's something I really would like to replicate. But it could also be maybe there was a time where you had to really overcome uh, a situation that required a lot from your teacher tool belt in terms of classroom management. But it has to be specific. That's what I really want to emphasize, right? Do not generalize, be as precise as possible. And additionally, I wanted to emphasize down here under that second bullet point, if you've ever run a study group of any kind, that is also teaching experience, right? You don't have to have formalized, I got in front of the room, there were 18 desks in front of me kind of teaching experience to be an educator. So consider relevant experiences that maybe are not as traditional. And then finally, you should consider the form of your philosophy. This should come last, though, right? After you've done your research, after you've brainstormed and thought about these memorable moments. So, if the institution values creativity and innovation, how can your philosophy demonstrate that? We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, if the institution feels more effective with traditional strategies, what should your philosophy look like? This isn't necessarily about being inauthentic, but it is about representing yourself in a version that would be palatable for the institution you're trying to apply for. And I want to emphasize that palatable also does not mean inauthentic. It simply means are your teaching values aligned with the institution you're applying to? And if not, that may not be the institution for you. There's plenty of them out there. Okay. So here are some things to keep in mind for the professional development side. Consider if you've taught before, what experience teaching or learning in a college classroom was effective or memorable for you. What format makes the most sense to you? This is specifically for like formatting and writing and drafting the teaching philosophy. And what are core values you have, but you are lacking actual experience with applying them? What are some ways to start collecting concrete evidence? So for me personally, before I went into teaching, it was really important to me to do tutoring and to seek these opportunities out in my community. That's one way to start collecting some concrete evidence, start interacting in maybe some more informal settings of education.
One thing I will really quickly add is if you're already teaching in a college classroom, do you already collect some kind of evidence from the students? Do you
Mm-hmm.
do end of the semester feedback? Do you do end of
Oh,
class feedback from the students? Those formative assessment, do you also, when students thank you through emails, and it's not just to boost your ego, not really, but like keep a hold of those emails that your students send you, and because those can be evidence for you moving forward for your teaching philosophy.
thanks, Boyan. That was a really good addition. Yeah. So let's talk about what teaching statements look like. So a traditional structure, like I had just brought up, Nancy Chisholm's 5 components of a teaching philosophy or a teaching statement, is the conceptualization of learning, and Doug's going to get into this for us. The conceptualizations of teaching, goals for students, implementation and assessment, and future success. The traditional structure also uses concrete examples. So those are these examples, kind of like what William was talking about. You could refer back to these pieces of evidence, or you could have a very memorable experience. And it's also grounded in research, both literal pedagogical research and your personal experiences as a learner and or teacher. The final component for a traditional structure, you'll see it's in red. It's because this is the key component that differentiates a traditional structure from a non-traditional structure. And so a traditional structure utilizes basic essay report model of writing. So think of the 5-paragraph essay or introduction, argument, counter argument, conclusion model, something that's pretty typical of writing a paper. So here are some examples of traditional structured teaching statements, excuse me. So this is an art teacher's philosophy. You'll notice there are big block paragraphs. There are indentations. It's just a very typical essay. It's actually, I think it is 5 paragraphs. And they start off with a very memorable experience of art education, and they round it off. Oh, thank you, William. Or I think it's Christina that is doing this. I appreciate it. No, it's Boyan. Okay. Either way, whoever's doing it, I so appreciate it. They start off with a very specific memory of being a child and what that meant for them receiving an art education. And then you'll notice in the second paragraph, they're actually citing resources in their, yep, yep, in their teaching philosophy. This is what I mean when I say it's grounded in both research and experience. Great, thank you. And then this is a debate coach's philosophy. So this is something that is a little bit, different. You're probably not ever going to, I don't imagine a lot of people here aspire to be a debate coach, but if that so happens, here's a perfect example for you. So the majority of this relies on experience, but there is I want to emphasize pedagogical citations in here. I really just wanted you to have all of these resources will be available to you. I really just wanted everybody to have a variety to pick from because you might find something in an art educator's philosophy that is not present in a debate coach's philosophy. Great. So let's talk about a non-traditional structure. It still follows Chisholm's 5 components. It still utilizes concrete examples and it's still grounded in research, but now it utilizes a nuanced form that deviates from the traditional structure. This can look like a collage philosophy, a presentation, an elevator speech, but it's still deliverable, right? It's still something that you can point to in an interview. But notice this last point, and that's very important. The non-traditional form enhances the content of the philosophy. It should not just be thrown in there without intention. So something like a collage philosophy is really great for somebody who has a lot of pictorial artifacts, like pictures from teaching, and they want to incorporate those meaningfully somehow. It's probably not great though for somebody who is just starting out in their teaching career. They won't have those kind of artifacts. So here's an English teacher's collage essay. Notice how it is both pictures of things in their classroom and things that they care about. And it also zeroes in on the pictures themselves to talk about each picture. And it's still citing information as it goes. So this is something that can be meaningfully incorporated into your teaching philosophy. But note, you should always have in the back of your mind the institution you're applying for's values and their preferred method of teaching when you're drafting a teaching philosophy. It is okay to have multiple teaching philosophies. I myself do, because I teach in a bunch of different contexts. So think of it like a resume or a cover letter, right? You design each one specific to the industry that you're applying to. Great. This is an elevator pitch. It's going to be really short, obviously. What kind of writing teacher do I want to be was the question for this elevator pitch. And it was very simple, right? They just went right in and they told exactly what kind of writing teacher they want to be. This is something that would be really great to even have, like, maybe not memorize, but be very, very familiar with, so you can whip it out at a moment's notice.
It's also super helpful when you're preparing for an interview.
That too. Being able to condense your teaching philosophy down into a paragraph, if it's a two-page document, is a really useful skill to have. So that's something that maybe you could even think of, like, if I want to make my teaching philosophy traditional and then I transform it into an elevator pitch, that might be something you consider. Great. Thank you. Pass it on to Doug.
Thank you, Meg. I'm going to echo a lot of what Meg is saying. And this is really going to be about gathering materials to write a teaching philosophy and shaping them into a form that is able to answer the questions that people will be asking. So, can I forward the slides, or thank you? Can you continue clicking? Thanks. So the substance of a teaching philosophy, the materials, is really what you do and why why you do these things. And so you might refer back to your answer to the miracle question if you've never taught before, or if you've taught before, you might think about the practices that you that are typically displayed in your course. So, like for instance, how do you 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 sorry people, I'm having trouble speaking this day. um how do you um well, what do you do to ask your students to practice? How do you how do you deliver feedback? How do you test them? These are all sorts of things that you want to write about, and you want to also explain the reasons why you choose to do these things in just the in in just the way that you do. So I would characterize that as the specific practices, but also the meaning behind those practices. And once you have those raw materials, then you can move on to using the Nancy Chisholm model to sort of bang them into shape. And what's nice about the Nancy Chisholm model is that it it links together the what and the why into topical areas that should be discussed. And it also poses the sorts of corresponding questions that your philosophy should answer. But what's really useful about this particular model is that it it pushes you to sort of reveal the relationships among these topical areas, and it makes it easier for you to write your philosophy focused. So there are really four areas that you need to consider, and you also should say something about what you're planning to do future and successful uh, as a future and successful teacher. There's the conceptualization of learning and teaching, but really it's probably best seen by the sorts of questions that are posed. So, how do you understand learning to happen best for your students? Basically, what do you ask them to do, and what does learning look like? Um, what is your role as a teacher in facilitating that learning? What kinds of what kinds of broad goals do you have for your students? And how do you realize those goals through course design? And how do you know if your students are learning? Those are the four sort of big questions you want to ask. And those sort of constitute the topical topics that you should discuss. Can you forward the slide, please? Um, so these things are certainly the first two. If you're someone who, for instance, relies on the discussion, then certainly your role as a teacher is going to be one of somebody who facilitates discussion, who figures out ways to make sure that students are talking and sharing. And so you can see that numbers 1 and 2 are very closely coupled. You can also see that if you have goals for students, the way in which you realize those goals through your assignment designs, those are going to be closely coupled as well. But in truth, all four are quite closely related to one another, and that's the power of the Nancy Chisholm model. Because I like to think of the Nancy Chisholm model as presenting you with a kind of object, a teaching learning object. Next slide, please. That if you look through one of the facets of this object, you can see the other facets. And that's a sort of fancy way of saying if you have a a thesis statement, a sort of, coherent, if you have a focus, you should be able to see all the other facets of your teaching through that one facet. If that makes sense. That you should be able to look through one of them. And this, yes, please, next slide. And this means that once you decide on the most important point, like say, for instance, your most important point may be found in the kinds of broad goals you have for your students. You should be able to present the ways in which you conceptualize learning and teaching and the kinds of assignment designs as 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 a as a kind of evidence for the goals that you've presented for your students. And then the teaching plan is usually subsequent to that. It's usually the last thing you want to write about. But it's best also if it also expresses the kinds of things that you have said before.
I wanted to really quickly pitch in before we go on to the next slide, because when we say goal of the students, and when you like, if you haven't really thought about this, this might come in as like, wait, what do you mean goal for students? They're just learning in my classes, right? So some of the examples I've seen is, for example, often in like STEM classrooms. My goal of the students when I'm teaching is to make the students feel like they are scientists instead of just being students. So around that, that's based on, if that's your main thing, that's your punchline, that's your thesis, then you're learning how you conceptualize learning, how students should be learning, how you would be teaching to the students, as well as how you should be assessing the students, and implementing the classes will fall in line with training the students to be scientists, right? It can also be in liberal arts classes. I want to create a classroom where students learn how to think critically. And because that is, in this day and age with the generative AI that's going on, that is becoming less and less the case, right? So, and then that's where you would bring in other elements to support that thesis. So I just wanted to put that out there before we go further.
Thank you, William. Next slide, please. So again, if the central focus of your teaching philosophy is the ways that you conceive of how your learners learn best, then you can certainly put that at the top, and you can support that through statements about how you conceive of your role as a teacher and the various kinds of goals you have for students, as well as the assignment designs, for instance. Next slide, please. So some of the sort of typical focuses that I've seen, like for instance, if it's if it's if it's if you're talking about goals for students, I've seen some instructors like to make their students into good like team players, and they will design learning activities that help students learn that. Now, obviously, that is a really kind of a meta goal, because generally the disciplinary goals are first, and so these are quite broad kinds of focuses, as you might say. So if, for instance, if you're interested in, if you think that students learn best when they're sharing perspectives, you might put that at the top, and then everything else can serve as topics that support that thought, and so on. Oh, I wouldn't. I would also look to number 5. So it's not, that is, sometimes it's not just the practices. It's also the setting that you create for your students, which doesn't happen by itself. For instance, if you're interested in creating a particular climate, you might want to write about that, and then everything else could also support that. And then again, maybe something that is not even on this list. Next slide.
Now we're going on to workshopping your teaching statement. And because this is a workshop and because Gemini is something that you can work on in your own time. But on the other hand, you're here today, and which means that this is a time where you can actually interact with others to kind of think through what your teaching philosophy is. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you into breakout rooms of twos. And so we're going to ask you to take turns describing your classroom that we did in our earlier brainstorming phase. So when you did the miracle questions for a very, very, very short amount of time, take your time describing your classrooms to your partner. And one of the moderators will be in the room with you just to help you time it. And then if it's your time to listen, ask questions on specific things about the class that is important to them. Take notes about your partner's classroom and what seems to be something that they value. And then we'll go after you each share, and after you've concluded, okay, it sounds like this is something like after you've kind of interrogated each other's miracle classrooms, I would like you to take turns saying like, okay, it sounds like you value so and so. And where you can actually find, and when we say that, that may sound a little bit confusing in terms of like, wait, what do you mean? Like what the value is? And because that's sometimes like a hard place to start. So if you look in the workshop booklet, if you go to page 7, there we go. There's a list of possible values, possible components of your classroom that you may value. And so this, if you can't really think of, okay, I don't know what to say the values are, this is something that you can use for that conversation. Okay, so Christina, do we have the breakout rooms ready?
Yes, Meg, I put you in room 1, and Doug, I put you in room 2, and there are 2 participants in each room, so I'll go ahead and open them now.
Yes, please. Okay, so how'd that go? Would anyone like to tell us like how it went, what they thought, you don't have to give me any details, but what were some of the elements that you pointed out to each other? You can just say like my partner's core value was this, or something like that. Would anyone like to share?
Sorry, do you want us to like put it in the chat or like actually talk?
Either way, whatever you feel comfortable with. All types of engagement is welcome here.
So my partner and I were from the same department, so we could share a lot of like specific examples of classes that we might have experienced. And I think both of us really like this doing hands-on application, either like collecting data out at the field and then processing that data into like a lab report, and then thinking the whole process of like I think you had said earlier, Boyan, of having your students think like a scientist, and like that was important to both of us, and incorporating that into our class.
I love that. So essentially, the reason why we start with a core value is because that's kind of where you get that special sauce. So because that gives you, okay, what's something that I want to emphasize in my teaching philosophy, in my teaching statement, right? So that's kind of where, and you may decide on various ways of how you are going to do that in terms of like verbalizing it. You can say like, um, the goal of my teaching is to create scientists out of students, right? And then you can explain that a little bit, right? Or it can be a specific phrase. So my teaching statement, whenever I write it, always starts with um, learning cannot happen when students don't feel safe. That's always my first sentence. And then I go into the different goals for the students. It kind of it focuses more on who I am as a teacher, what I do, as well as what kind of environment students can learn. And that, so like I go into detail about those things along with a lot of data that I've collected over the years. So like, and that's my special sauce. That's what makes my thing special. And in some versions of teaching philosophies, I would use a specific what's it call it quote that I will not take full credit for that statement because I actually heard it at a speech at an event that I went to. So like sometimes I would put it in that way. So like there's a lot of different ways you can formulate it. Okay. So now what I want you to do is take a little bit of time to reflect on the discussion on your own. And so essentially, how does your miracle classroom that you've identified value, sorry, and the value that was identified say about the following? So we're going back to the Nancy Chisholm framework, right? So how learning happens. When do students learn best? What activities facilitate learning? Right? So is it about collaborating? Is it about discussing? Is it about problem solving? Is it about projects? Is it reflecting? Or just as was that Jacob earlier? Jacob shared, like, is it about having students have hands-on experience rather than just absorbing information, right? What goals do you have for students? What do you expect students to know at the end of class? What kind of skill and relationship do you expect them to form? Meg, I'm gonna ask you to mute a little bit because I'm getting background noises. Sorry. Okay, so going back. And I said scientists generally, but think like a chemist might be another one. Connect concepts to real life examples to show that what we are learning in the classroom isn't just about a vague theory, but rather it's something that's connected to themselves, or build support systems that assist their learning and that will last them throughout their whole life. And that, if you don't have that much teaching experience, you can even start with a particularly impactful learning experience that you've had in your classrooms in terms of a specific class that got you into academia that has lasted over the years. I have one of those from my master's program back in the day. So things like that. So use the reflection questions to determine a core value that you hold in your on teaching, as well as some supporting values. And what will be useful for this right now is to use the booklet. So here, page 8, it goes through a specific question, and this is where you can start writing some of these things. And I'm going to give you a little bit of time. It's 51. I'll give you about 3 minutes to kind of start writing some of these things, and you can go ahead and pitch questions if you have any specific, if there's something like really vague that you're thinking of, but you're not sure how to word that. That's what we're here for. So please, like, I'll give you until 4:54. Okay, so that's 4:54. So the booklet is going to be really helpful for you as you are going through this, because so notice how so page 9 and 10 also is ways for you to brainstorm. And this is, I like to think of this like a step before you actually get to that teaching philosophy. You can use everything that's in this booklet. You can use only some of it, whatever works best for your process. I tend to be a little bit more visual in terms of like thinking through, okay, how are these things connected? So I like having that mind map in there. So you basically, this is one way that I started originally. So you start with a top value and you think about a supporting value. So if you, sorry, because I keep saying safe classrooms are essential for learning to happen. So in that, what do I mean by safe classrooms? So one, it's a classroom where there's no judgment. And so that's the support. When I go into supporting value, it may be supporting practice, it may be a supporting element. So for me, ground rules are a big thing in terms of everyone coming together and co-creating those ground rules. So in that sense, I'm kind of combining two things. In terms of teaching practice, I'll go into specific examples of before and after I implemented implemented ground rules. Other supporting values, things like I like transparency in my classroom because no students should come into class and feel like, oh, maybe I don't belong here because I don't understand. So I try to make sure everything about that class is a little bit more transparent, right? So things like that. And how do I do that? I have my teaching practice would include things like clearest, muddiest points, which essentially is every time you have class, I ask students, okay, what was the clearest thing about the class? And what was the muddiest point? Which is, what was the point that was still confusing? Or the more you heard about it, the more confused you are. Because I can't possibly know everything about my students. So I try to give, so I collect that information. So I give, the following class, I would come back and give students, okay, so here is what I collected and let me explain a little bit. So that's what I mean by transparency, right? So that's what I would put in these when I'm brainstorming here. I would also say you can print these out. It might be easier for you to like actually write on them. Um, Depends. I like to write with my hand. You may prefer to write on your iPad or just on the computer. But yeah, so use those. The other things that you can think you need to be thinking about is what evidence can you provide about your core value? So how do you know that your core value is important? What classroom practices and feedback can you provide for how you support the core value? So going back, it can be the clearest, muddiest points, such as how I've said I do it. It can be the midterm feedback you manually collect. Before I knew some about like, oh, I can actually do midterm feedback, I only had end of the semester feedback. So because if you're the instructor of record, they give you that feedback, but that's not really, it doesn't help as much. So, but I will say these are all strategies that we at the CTL help you implement. So reach out to us. And finally, you're still in grad school, you're still teaching, right? So what are some ways that you can start collecting evidence if you feel like, oh, I don't have enough evidence to support these values. So going forward, what can you do? What should you do to strengthen that? And I'm kind of going into like more of where you can be starting. So brainstorming, if you're not sure what your teaching philosophy is, use a blank concept map to focus on brainstorming. So what is a setting in which you would like to teach? What does that look like? But if you are already familiar with teaching, start thinking about, okay, an elevator pitch. Use the thesis, supporting values and evidence, come up with a paragraph long description of what your teaching philosophy is. And that might be a helpful way to condense it together to actually think about what is really important to you. Or you can start your teaching statement. And we are almost out of time. We literally have a minute left. So these are some ways that you can workshop and think about things. And please reach out to me or Doug or Meg if you want more help and more assistance in terms of developing your teaching philosophy. That being said, we already shared the resources as well as Gemini. Gemini would be also a good place to kind of like throw your ideas around. I did also design that gem so that it will give you some concrete ways to start collecting more evidence as well. So please use those. And the feedback link is also in the chat, but here's the QR code. And finally, Meg.
Yeah, so I facilitate a writers group for graduate students only on campus. It's called the GradJag Writers Workshop. We meet virtually in the graduate commons or thank you, Christina, or in UL 4115 is what the graduate commons room is on the fourth floor of the library. We also meet virtually via Zoom. So Tuesdays, 12 to 2, or Thursdays, 4 to 6. So really with this workshop, it's called a workshop, but it's really more about fostering community among graduate students. So that way you don't feel so lonely when you're trying to write your thesis or your dissertation, or even if you're just working on your homework. It can be really, really lonely to be in graduate school. So this is a really great place to meet other graduate students and work on your stuff. So, and I wanted to also mention the Writing Center. We are an immense resource for people. So if you are somebody who just needs some help on whatever you're working on, could be your resume, cover letter, teaching statement, the Writing Center is here for you. So.
And that's it. The slides, I just realized that the folder doesn't have our slides in there. I'll make sure it's in there. So we'll also send a follow-up email reminding you of the feedback as well as the resource link, as well as once this is, I need to edit some of the recording, but once that's up, you'll get that email too. And that's it for today. Thank you for coming in. Let us know if we can be of help. We're here. We support grad students too. We're not a far away just for faculty thing. So yeah, take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
y'all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day.